Jesus wept. This is the shortest verse in the King James Version of our Bible. Jesus wept. The raising of Lazarus is a preface to the Passion of Christ, right down to the rock covering the tomb. But it raises important questions about Christ as the trip to Jerusalem ends with the redemptive event, the crucifixion and death of Christ and his resurrection. The story is sandwiched in between stories of the woman at the well, healing of the blind man that appears like Lazarus' story in only one gospel, the Gospel of John. While Jesus and his disciples were on their way across the Jordan, where John the Baptist had been baptizing, he got word that his dear friend Lazarus was ill in Bethany, home with Mary and Martha. We don't know any more about the particulars of this relationship between Mary, Martha, Lazarus, and Jesus, but they were obviously very close. The sisters sent a message to their friend Jesus that Lazarus was ill. They said, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But Jesus tells them, "Don't worry. This illness won't kill him. Rather, it is for God's glory that it is happening." So even though Jesus loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, he stays right where he is for 2 more days. So, why did he do that? Why sit around for 2 days longer when you know your friend is dying and you could heal him in the twinkling of an eye? Finally, he says, "Okay, guys, let's go to Judea." The disciples thought it was a suicide mission and were not happy with Jesus' decision. We have reached the point where things are really heating up and they can feel what's coming. But finally, he says that their friend Lazarus is asleep. They didn't get that by sleep, Jesus meant dead. Jesus says to them, I am glad I was not there, so that you, the disciples, may believe. Because amazingly, even some or all of them still at this point didn't get it. By the time they get to Bethany, poor Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. Martha runs to meet Jesus and says, Lord, if only you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. When Jesus tells her Lazarus will rise again, Martha misunderstands and thinks Jesus means that everyone who believes in him will eventually die and be resurrected. In this I am saying, I am the resurrection and the life, Jesus announces that the promise of the resurrection is not some distant event, but is available now in him. Jesus shares completely in God's ability to give life. As the resurrection and the life, Jesus defeats the power of death. In the future and in the present. The most compelling question for me, though, from this story is, why is Jesus so upset that he ended up weeping along with the Jews who had come out to mourn with Mary and weep with her? Jesus was, quote, greatly disturbed in spirit and greatly moved, and he wept because he was fully human, just like us. This story raises why raise this poor man from the dead after his spirit has been with the Lord for 4 days? I don't know what about you, but if God, through Christ, sent me back to this vale of tears after I died, I would not be happy about it. I've told this story a couple of times, not often. I, I've had a bunch of little surgeries through my life, like we all have, but I had never been under general anesthetic until a few months ago. And a friend of mine, who's a priest, came out to see me right before the surgery. And here's what I realized. There's two outcomes here. One, this surgery will go great. I'll wake up, I'll never know what happened. That's a good thing, right? Thing two, this surgery will go haywire, and I will not wake up on this earth. I will die. And I thought, that's better than option one. I did. And when I thought that, there was complete peace. And I wasn't a bit nervous about the surgery. And witness the fact I am up here, option one occurred. Well, Martha, who we think of as the practical one, is concerned about this raising from the dead plan because Lazarus has been dead 4 days. I throw this in here because it's a fact. Decomposition was fast in the Middle East. He already smelled. And she and the crowd were scared that when the tomb was opened, they would see something horrible that they didn't want to see. I don't blame them. How many of them really thought Jesus could pull this off? How many do you really think had that much faith? But that's not what they saw and heard. Jesus prays, Father, thank you for having heard me. When? There's no account here of Jesus, while he's waiting around 2 days, praying for his friend Lazarus. There's no account of him praying at the scene of the tomb. When did he get this praying done? Jesus says, I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd, so that they may believe you sent me. Mysteriously enough, it is the voice of one dying in agony upon a cross that has convinced innumerable souls that God is love. Jesus indeed raises Lazarus from the dead. And by doing so, he signed his own death warrant. And although some of the Jews in the crowd believed in him when they saw this, the Jewish power structure promptly launches a plot to kill him, because this has gotten out of hand. He has tens of thousands of followers by this point. He has done miraculous healings. He's raised others from the dead. Not 4 days dead, but he has. He has driven out the Gerasene demoniac and other demons. How much more did they need to see? But when they saw this, they knew. We continue to let this man do these things, we are out of power. So Lazarus came forth. It's a great story. Though for us as well, it will be well if, like John the Evangelist, we see it above everything else as a symbol and proof of the spiritual powers the Christ can use on our behalf. Why did Jesus weep? Simple. Though he knew what was going to transpire, the divine part of him, also fully human. What we saw, what they saw, was a man crying over the death of his friend. Now, it's only 2 miles. Jerusalem.